Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome all guests. We're pleased today to have a lot of guests with us, and on an agenda item we'll cover in just a few minutes. But our first rule of thumb here is to give our roll call for our board and to establish the certification of our quorum and our introductions around the room of board members as well as staff that need to be recognized, and then we'll move on in. I will tell you at this moment that I'm going to not do something that I typically don't do. I'm going to move the agenda items around a little bit based on some of the items that I know we need to cover today. So I've tried to best organize that. So we'll cover all those agenda items, but they won't necessarily be all in the order that you've been given them. So first of all, our roll call. Brittany Webb.
Here.
Dr. David Smith.
Here.
Daryl Gaines.
Here.
Michael Fitch.
Here.
And David Weir, myself, I'm present. All 5 board members are present, and I will establish that we do have a quorum and can do the business that we need to do today. So our board has been called upon and recognized. I'll start with staff with Christine. If you'd we'll go around the room for staff, and please identify who you are and what role that you have.
I am Christine Wright. I'm the Advisory Board Program Specialist for the Athletic Trainers Board.
Brian Francis, Executive Director of TDLR.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Mike Arismandis. I'm the Chairman for the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, so it's a pleasure to be here with you guys today.
Carla James, Deputy Executive Director, TDLR.
Nick Voinas, Chief of Staff, TDLR.
And I'm Molly Fudell. I'm with the Office of General Counsel. Mary Winston, Attorney for the Advisory Board, TDLR.
Trey Seals, Director of Customer Service.
Stephen Mills, Medical and Health Professions Section.
Fanny Primo, Education Examination Division.
Ray Pizarro, Director for the Education Examination Division. Ken Sharp, I'm in the Enforcement Division.
Okay. Any other staff members that would like to be?
Leonard Rivas, Licensing Manager for the Medical and Health Professions.
I'm Virginia Fields, Prosecutor with Enforcement.
Okay.
Ron Foster, Senior Prosecutor Enforcement.
Stuart?
Stuart Myers, Medical and Health Professions, Section Compliance Division.
Okay. Thank you, staff, for attending and all that you do for our board and to support our efforts. Board members, you were sent in the email the minutes from our last meeting that occurred on July the 19th, 2017, and you were able to review those. Is there any additions, subtractions, or edits that we need to make on those? If not, I'd like to have a motion to accept.
Motion.
Rev makes a motion, and Brittany seconded that. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. So our minutes are approved, and I've signed them for the record. So my next agenda item comes to us, and we're here under the sad auspices, but it's an opportunity for the advisory board, Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, to recognize a family and certainly to recognize an individual. Kayla Simple was tragically taken from us back last early 2017 due to a car accident that involved a drunk driver. Ms. Simple was a student athletic trainer at Navarro College. She had been an athletic trainer in high school, and her family is joining us today, and we're going to recognize her with an honorary license. And to my knowledge, this has not ever been done before, but the staff has done an excellent job in preparing this, and we want to recognize her family. You know, when these types of things happen, in most cases, when a young life is taken from us, there's a lot of questions that typically never get answers to. And this is certainly one. Why Kayla, and why in this situation? Why is this family up to dealing with this? But we certainly have to rely on faith and understand that there's a higher being, and God has a better plan. That her house was ready in heaven, and ready to bring her there to serve there. But by By her impact on her family, her fellow students, our athletic trainer at Navarro, she impacted a lot of lives, and she continues to impact a lot of lives today with the effort of the awareness to try to eliminate or limit drunk driving. And so her family is here today, and it brings me great honor to recognize them. And I would like to invite Mr. Francis and also Mr. Mendez to make any statements that he would like to make as we recognize Kayla for her service and what she has done for our profession and her family and what they continue to do.
Mr. Chairman, it's your ball game. Since we're going to go with all the football and sports metaphors, we're going to hand it off to you right now.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be
Thank
able to
you,
be here today. I know that when Brian, thank you, sir. I know when Brian mentioned this to me and said that we were going to honor Kayla, I told him, I said I wanted to be there. I did because of the fact that this is a special, tragic occasion. It's one of those issues that we see far too many times of the death of someone that's got a long life, that's got a vibrant life, that has a promising life cut short by a drunk driver. I wish that there was something that I could say that could ease the pain, but I can't. I read a saying over the weekend that says that, you can close your eyes to reality, but not to the memories. And I know that you have a lot of good memories from what I've read. The information that I know Mr. Yost gave us about Kayla, I think that she would have been outstanding in this field because of the love that she had for understanding the mechanics of the body, knowing how it worked, and then just her drive to be able to want to get a scholarship out of high school in athletic training. That's pretty amazing. I believe my understanding is she had 200 scholarships offered at the high school
In Fort Bend, the whole
at Fort
school
Bend,
district.
and she was the only one with an athletic trainer scholarship. So it's pretty amazing. I wish that I could provide words of comfort to you, but I know that there's nothing that I can say or do that will comfort the pain that you feel not having her with you any longer. I know that she was taken far too soon. It was very tragic, but I hope that what we provide here for you today will be just kind of a token of understanding and hope that you can understand that we hope to be able to give you a little something here for this. I do have a honorary athletic trainer license that I'm going to read to you right quick, and I think Mr. Francis is on his way up here. It says this: the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation honorary athletic trainer license to Kayla Simon Simple. The Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation recognizes Kayla Simon Simple for her trailblazing role as the first Fort Bend ISD graduate to receive a full scholarship in athletic training to Navarro College, and for her academic excellence and dedication. TDLR also recognizes her passion, vibrant spirit, and winning smile. She worked with both faculty and athletes to achieve her goal of becoming an athletic trainer. For her commitment to for her commitment to the health and safety of athletes in the state of Texas, we therefore confer an honorary athletic trainer license on this day, January 8th, 2018. So, Brian, if you can come up. Let this thing start popping.
That's all right, that's all right. Okay, two things, if we could.
So to the family, thank you so much for being here. When I saw the shirts today that talked about athletic trainers against drunk driving, we were meant to be here at this moment. You had no idea that we also regulate the program that teaches young people and adults how to drive, that we have an opportunity to carry Kayla's message beyond Hightower High School, beyond Navarro Junior College. We get to carry it throughout Texas, and I think that's what she was about. I had an opportunity to look at the pictures from the vigil at Navarro College. Man, when you see those big, yoked-up athletes hunkered over a flickering light with tears in their eyes, that tells you the impact she had. There is something special, and I talked to this group before when we brought them on board. There's something special about athletic trainers. The contact, the personal touch that they have with young people and how they're able to help them through those dark moments, injuries, when they think that they can't get back on the field, there is something special in the heart of athletic trainers. She had that, and she has that. I never speak about people in past tense. She has that. Look at it, this room. She's still doing it. She's still touching. She's still moving. So that smile is ridiculous. That smile is infectious. Oh, I see it from Mama right now. There it is, right there. That smile is amazing. We won't forget this moment. So I'd like to invite the chairman up, Mr. Weir. I'd like to invite Kayla's mother up. On behalf of the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, our chairman, Mike Ayers-Mendez, Chairman Weir, we'd like to present you with Kayla's honorary athletic trainer license. Thank you so much for letting us be a part of her life. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm not going to say we Oprah, but because you came, we got something for everybody. So we have flowers, if we could, Tamala.
Oh, my God.
It's all right. It's beautiful, isn't it? We'd like to give a flower to each of you as well. Go and give Uncle one too. Go and give Uncle one. And then we also have certificates for each of you to carry. And I just have to thank our staff, Christine and Tamala, Delia, Mary Winston, Nick Voenis, for making this happen. Rhonda, who spent tireless hours over the weekend cranking it out. So we've got Sharice here. I'd like to invite her up. And if we can get the mother, I'd like to take a picture with the advisory board members first. And then, Mr. Chairman, we'll layer ourselves in.
Board members, please join me.
Sharice, you're in control.
Where you all want us?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if we could you call a brief recess on the meeting?
Sure. We will go into a brief recess while we'll take this quick picture. And then at that point in time, once we take all the pictures that we need, I will allow the family to leave. So we'll stay in a brief recess to allow them to leave if they so choose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll bring our meeting back into session out of our brief recess there. Thank you, staff and guests there with us for indulging us a few moments to make this recognition. What I will do, our next step is we're going to go ahead and do our staff reports. I know there's probably one of the things in our staff reports that will tie in into our next item. So I'm going to go ahead and do staff reports, and then we'll keep progressing through this agenda. So, licensing division and statistics.
Good morning, members. Chairman Weir, Leonard Rivas, with licensing manager with the Medical and Health Professions Group. In your advisory board packet, you received the licensing statistics for athletic trainers for the fourth quarter, FY 2017, and then for the first quarter for fiscal year 2018. On the bottom of the report, I provided numbers for temporary licenses issued for fourth quarter, FY 2017, and then for the first quarter of 2018. Do you have any questions about the licensing statistics?
Any questions, board? Thank you.
I would like to also add that we added 3 new staff members to the Medical and Health Professions Group. Chara McCrane, who comes to us from the Department of State Health Services, Audrey Strawn, who comes to us from the Department of Motor Vehicles, and Veronica Coronado, that comes to us from the Board of Podiatry. And that concludes my report. I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
All right.
We'll keep moving forward to Enforcement Division.
Good morning, Chairman Ware, board members. My name is Virginia Fields. I'm a prosecutor with the Enforcement Division, and I'll be giving your enforcement staff report today. Our current projects and accomplishments basically involves with the transition of the various programs and the hiring of new prosecutors. We have decided to consolidate the health-related and medical programs into the medical and health-related professions team. Myself and my esteemed colleague Karen Cox will be the prosecutors on that team, and we'll be proceeding with cases like the athletic trainers, podiatry, orthotics, midwives, and the other programs that have transferred over. I've given you the key statistics in your report for 2017 and 2018. 2017 reflects the one agreed order that was substantive, discussed in your last meeting, that was the agreed revocation as a result of improper relations with a student. That was a revocation of license. There was no penalty sought. That was taken in April of 2017. Your key statistics for 2018, there are currently 3 cases open in enforcement. 2 of those are under investigation, and 1 has been closed with a warning. That entailed operating or performing with an expired license. The license renewal corrected that, and they were advised of the law under which they needed to operate. That's all for our report. Karen and I look forward to working with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions, board? Hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Education and Examination Division.
Hello, I'm Fanny Pringle with Education Examination. Chairman Weir, members, I believe you have our report, and I just passed a correction page. The beginning of the report goes over our email communication statistics and the new division organizational chart on the bottom of that. The second page is the written exam statistics by month, and then the written exam statistics for the entire quarter, and that's where our correction is that second chart there. Then we have our jurisprudence examination completions, and I've additionally, prior to the meeting, I've had hand out the written exam and practical exam pass rates by institution through the calendar year, this past December. Are there any questions? I know you're going to be discussing exams later in the agenda. Do you have any questions for me now?
I'd like to reserve the fact to bring you back. So
Okay.
please do not leave the room because I think we're going to have extensive conversation. Board, I know we're going to have extensive conversation, but directly on what she reported to you right now, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to the Compliance Division.
Good morning, board members. Stuart Myrick, Medical and Health Professions Section, the Compliance. You see my report before you, our report before you. Just to note, we were at SWATA this past year, had a great time, as I always do. I will be at the Greater Houston Athletic Trainers Society workshop this coming Saturday to greet participants, answer questions, and just do some general outreach. As far as the section as a whole goes, we are maintaining helping to maintain the successful operation of the athletic trainers licensing program as well as the other phase 1 programs, and just completed the transition of the 6 phase 2 programs, code enforcement officers, offender education programs, sanitarians, mold assessors, remediators, and massage therapy and laser hair removal facilities and personnel. And, we are currently making sure those are being maintained at a high rate. Any questions?
Questions, Board? Hearing none. Thank you, Stuart. And I believe, I'm sorry, customer service.
Good morning, board chair and members. Thank you for your service. Thank you for that wonderful tribute to the family. I'm here today, and this is new, and just give me just a half a second there. I wasn't expecting. So I'm here to introduce customer service and talk a little bit about how we do what we do, why we do what we do, and that was an example. The ceremony there is a great example of the kind of interactions that we have with our customers. We are frontline. We are first point of contact. We hear the stories from the licensees, the applicants, the citizens who have questions, and so customer service is a team of about 50 of us, and we're heart. I'd say we are not only the voice of the customer. We want to see them succeed. So we interact through asking questions to find out what the issue is, or what the need is, or what the problem might be to getting a customer towards their objective, whether that's to get a license or an answer to a question or to find a resource that they need from our website. So we do a lot of guiding, explaining. We have a wonderful team that responds to the athletic trainer group, and you have the numbers in your report. We don't have, as compared to the rest of the 500,000 calls that we took in the last year, athletic trainers does represent a smaller portion of that, but it's an important piece of what we do. We have a wonderful team led by Dawn Robinson, who is the team lead for that group, and they handle those athletic trainer requests, along with Tuan Nguyen, who is the manager here. And we'll be reporting on my behalf in the future should I not be able to make the meeting. But we wanted to take an opportunity to sit down and introduce ourselves, tell you a little bit about the heart of the agency and what we do in terms of connecting all the pieces and connecting the dots between the public and the internal workings of the agency as we try to get that information back and forth between the parties that need to receive that, whether it be education, compliance, enforcement. We are usually the first point to the agency. I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have. That concludes my report, but I just wanted to take a minute to introduce myself.
One statement or one question. So are you and your particular office the point of the spear, and I would like to say the starting point? If there is a problematic case, I was made aware of one yesterday.
Sure.
Anyway, but are you the person that we need to go to when we as a board, and then you can follow
Right.
that chain as to whether it's an exam, whether it's a application, maybe it's a deficient application that
Sure.
doesn't get notified back to the applicant.
Sure.
Is that your particular role?
So what I will say is that we do try to work through the advisory contacts, and Tamala and Christine and Delia are those folks who interact directly with the board, and they quickly get those to us. And we do get those several times per week, depending on the industry and the need. And then if we don't have the answer, we certainly get that. We run point on getting those parties connected that need to get together to figure out whatever it is that is causing the deficiency in this case.
Okay, so I guess my question is should I send an individual, if we're contacted, should I send that individual and step out of the case and send them and give them
You
your
sure
name?
may.
And let them blow your phone up and email? Or
They-
do we
they-
write on behalf of them to our board support and allow that chain to go through that? I just want that.
Sure.
plain.
It is your call. You are more than welcome to have them call the 800 number, but this industry actually does prefer to email, and we actually love that. So email is actually that first point of contact for us. But you're certainly able to have them give us a call on the 800
Can you
number.
give me your email, please?
Sure. It is cs.advisory.boards. Well, what I'll do is I'll get that information to you off of the open meeting, and I don't want to have Twan's email blow up with
Why not?
responses.
Ours is.
Yeah.
Just told me you're about customer
Yes, sir.
service, and we
Yes,
have
sir.
customers watching us right now.
Personally, my number, my mobile is on the website as the point of contact should someone just really not be able to find what they need, and people do call me on that work cell, so it is out there. Do not misunderstand, but I prefer to get that email to you off the mics and to the world in the open meeting, if that's okay.
Well, since
Chairman,
it's your first day, I'll let you get your slide.
I appreciate
Chairman,
it.
Board, I would probably just give you a recommendation to go ahead and, if you're contacted by someone, just tell them to go ahead and directly contact customer support. And the reason is because they have firsthand knowledge, so they can pass that information on. I would probably also suggest that you notify the advisory board contacts, or Brian or Carla or Nick.
Okay.
Make them aware of what's going on so they have the ability to track it also.
Okay.
But if it's coming directly from the individual that either has a complaint, has a comment, or something going on with their license, then that is the route to go.
Okay.
And just make them, just say, contact customer service, they'll take care of you, but then go ahead and on your side, just let them know so that they can kind of do a roundabout follow-up.
Well, this particular case, being it's second-hand, third-hand, I don't want to go into it in an open meeting here and going through, but I would just say that, when your customer service people, we've got to make sure that when these calls come in, that they're investigated, applications are looked at, so that we're not just say, okay, you've got to wait 7 to 10 days, and then they call back 7 to 10 days, you've got to wait 7 to 10 days. At some point in time, that application is going to be put into the system, and deficiency is going to be noted, and we've just got to make sure that research is on front so that somebody doesn't miss a test. Yeah, the applicant may have made a mistake, but we want to make sure we're giving them the most current information to where they stand with us.
I agree.
So-
I agree. And that way, by you contacting the executive management, it gives the ability for them to circle back to make sure
Okay.
there's a follow-through with that.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Okay, any other questions, Board? Okay, thank you, sir.
Very nice to meet you.
Okay, I think our last report's from the Executive Office.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, board members, I'm Nick Voinis of TDLR, and want to wish you all Happy New Year. Thanks for being here today, and thank you for your service to the state of Texas. Here to bring you our Executive Office report, which is a brief summary of what we've been busy doing around the agency. 2017 was a pretty busy year, and as it was for everybody, but TDLR staff was very, very involved in bill implementation for legislation that has been passed over the last 2 sessions. This process continues, and all our divisions are involved in either developing, reviewing rules, which we'll discuss a little more here briefly, communicating with stakeholders, appointing and prepping advisory boards, hiring additional staff, dealing with education exams, IT programs, and more. A majority of the work has been completed, but we've got more to go as we continue to implement programs this year and next. 2018 is also a year where we get involved with our statute-driven every other year strategic planning exercise. We'll be going through that important process again this upcoming spring. Last fall, we were busy helping our licensees and small businesses along the Texas Gulf Coast recover from the devastation of Hurricane Harvey. We worked with the governor's office and Governor Abbott's Rebuild Texas efforts, and were successful in implementing procedures to help all eligible licensees in the affected areas to help them recover, return to work as quickly as possible. Our Harvey focus now is on the rebuild by protecting small business and consumers, avoid unlicensed activity, and ensuring that they receive quality work for their hard-earned dollars. We have information on this and on our website at tdlr.texas.gov and the Governor's Rebuild Texas site as well. But I wanted to visit with you a little bit about your website. We do refer to it as our window to the world. It's our chief communications tool with the public and our licensees. But I wanted to share some recent web traffic numbers with you concerning your site. Over the last 6 months, the Athletic Trainers website had 26,415 page views, and that's an average of 144 per day. 63% of those visitors accessed your site from a desktop computer, while 32% did so from a smartphone and 5% from a tablet. And also the top reasons for visiting the site, number 1 reason was laws and rules, followed by exam information, frequently asked questions, forms, and continuing education information. Also wanted to emphasize that we're always looking at our websites to improve them, make them better, make them more informative, more user-friendly. So anytime you guys have any feedback or whatever, please pass it along our way, and we'll be glad to have it. But also wanted to promote our social media accounts. If you're on social media, we do have Facebook and Twitter accounts for you to keep track of TDLR events and activities. So, thank you.
Okay, any questions, comments from board? I think from a Windows perspective to our membership, Stuart being present at our district meeting in July is important there, and I think, Stuart, probably as people stop by, kind of question them as to do they ever visit our site and any comments and things like that, so that you can get some of those feedback and take it back to them. That might be a good channel to follow there. So, okay. All right. I think is there any other reports? I know on the agenda that's what's listed. Any other reports by staffers that need to be mentioned that I have neglected? Okay. I'm going to move now into public comment. I've had 2 individuals, Mr. Dennis Hart, Mr. Randy Matthews, that have signed in for public comment. That want to make a few statements to staff and the board. So, gentlemen, whichever one you want to go first, or both of you can come to the table and sit there together if you would like. But Mr. Hart, are you going to lead?
That's what I was told.
Okay. Mr. Hart, you have the floor.
Good morning, Chairman Weir and advisory board members and staff, athletic trainer colleagues, friends, and yes, thank you for the opportunity to present proposed changes to the advisory board rules. My name is Dennis Hart, and I am an athletic trainer. My recent renewed license number is number 120, which I share proudly. The process was flawless, and my thanks to the TDLR staff. The Texas Practice Act Review Task Force was approved by the Texas State Athletic Trainers Association Board of Directors and was directed to review the Texas Athletic Trainers Practice Act. Randy Matthews and I co-chair the task force. The task force membership is made up of experienced practitioners, athletic trainer educators, and leaders in the profession. The Texas State Athletic Trainers Association mission is to enhance, advance, and promote the athletic training profession in the state of Texas. The review of the athletic trainers' educational standards is due to the coming changes in the Commission on Accreditation of Athletic Training Education, sometimes referred to as CATE, national standards of requiring an entry-level master's starting in 2024. We believe maintaining the bachelor's level apprenticeship licensure program is an effective means of educating entry-level athletic trainers. The proposed rule changes, which I think you have received, have been developed to improve and update the advisory board rules regulating educational requirements and practice for licensed athletic trainers. These include, number one, the task force proposes courses for apprenticeship be updated. The proposed list of courses are appropriate for kinesiology and or exercise science majors. Two, the task force proposes that a four-year institution shall designate an apprenticeship program coordinator to ensure proper exposure and instruction of the proposed curriculum content to the athletic training students. Three, the task force recommends the addition of seven domains of athletic training competencies with specific knowledge and skills for each domain. This proposed addition will provide athletic training educators with consistent curriculum content to educate the athletic training students for the best apprenticeship learning experience possible. Four, the proposed changes and additions are to provide the athletic training educators the standard curriculum content to educate the athletic training students for the mastery of the knowledge and skills at a level to be successful on the apprenticeship licensure program. Five, there are proposed changes to the rules regarding licensure exam eligibility for other healthcare professions. In closing, the Texas State Athletic Trainers Association Practice Act Review Task Force recommends these proposed changes. We believe the proposal reflects the needed updates, advancements, and improvements to the educational standards for athletic trainers. Our belief is that these changes will lead to an improved candidate exam results and a better prepared practitioner to ensure the protection of the public of those who practice athletic training. And I will be available for questions.
Let me allow Mr. Matthews to make a public comment, and then we will phrase our questions if the board has them back and forth, and we'll create open dialogue. Mr. Matthews, I recognize you.
Good morning, Chairman Weir and Advisory Board. I will just make a few short comments. Obviously, Mr. Hart gave the general meat of the proposal to you. I would also like to say my license number as an athletic trainer is 374. I have a little higher one than Mr. Hart, but I recently renewed, and I would like to congratulate the TDLR staff on the quick turnaround.
Thank you very much.
As a longtime college educator, I, along with many others, have always had an issue with the rules that listed education classes within the rules part of what we were operating off of. The difficulty in trying to make classes at Angelo State University fit and at Texas A&M and at Southwest Texas and so on and so forth. And I do appreciate the difficulty that the advisory board and staff had in trying to interpret transcripts. It was the thought of the task force that we would try to at least clean that up, but instead list the domains and competencies, which would make it easier for athletic trainers at the colleges and universities who were directing programs to fulfill the educational requirements for their students. We tried to use and look at the most up-to-date competencies and educational standards, but also realizing in putting this in the rules, it is a fluid document. As healthcare changes, there will need to be changes to the educational standards. We feel like this is a best effort on the task force part, and we would urge the advisory board to give due consideration to our proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. So, as I understand it, what we'll do is we will actually close the public comment, but I will allow, then we may open back up in the dialogue into that next agenda item.
So, Mr. Chairman,
that
Brian
okay?
Francis.
Yes, sir.
So, and I apologize for being out. I was seeing the family out. So, just for clarification, these incredible recommendations, they were included under I as the public comment portion. And because we've got education requirements and apprenticeship elements included there, and just generally speaking, you know, under public comment, we don't have the dialogue back and forth, but I think you fold them, if you fold them under I, they have that ability to do exactly what you want. So just for clarification purposes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So what I said.
Absolutely what you just said. I had to say it on the record.
Thank you, Mr. Director.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will move on then to item I, and then we will discuss, we have on our agenda the discussion and possible recommendations regarding the education pass rates. And I know we as a board have been monitoring these. We had great discussion within the framework that we could at our last board meeting. The scores on our licensure exam, which for the most part are coming out of apprenticeship programs, or students that are coming from the apprenticeship programs are taking that test. We have a less than acceptable, I use that term very graciously, less than acceptable success rate. And it is the desire of our board that we look at ways that which this can be improved. And so with the help of TS-ATA and their task force, they have begun and done much work behind the scenes to make some proposals to us as a board to try to address these things. I will say I have done some contact with legal in regards to statutory authority. We really must have these college universities take ownership in regards to their programs. TDLR cannot oversee and statutorily regulate the college and university in the manner that Katie does from a BOC standpoint. That is not an avenue that which can be pursued. So that we really have to start this from the foundation and ground up, with giving the framework back to the college and universities of giving them what the expectations are for their students, and allowing them to be able to frame their programs that the best way they particularly can. And so each university, we're not giving them a blueprint to say everything has to be built the same way. The house can be built differently, but at the end, we must have a good standing house. And it has to be supported by a great foundation, great walls and roofs that we can stand on as a board to be able to continue to support the apprenticeship route. And so that is a concern, and I think I can speak on behalf of the board that what we want to do. And so I thank you, I thank the task force for the work that they have done in regards to this. I've done a little bit of an advising role into the task force and shared with them some of the testing results that we've had to emphasize the need for this. And you know, there was discussions made that should it be a different document created to manifest this content. And my encouragement was that this go into the rules because it allows a normal vetting process by our public to be able to see what this content is, and that we can be able to place this out there. And then we can receive from license holders and stakeholders and the public to make sure that we are doing a good job with this. This doesn't need to be a separate document that's sitting out on its own without proper vetting. So it was my encouragement that this come in through the rules format and that we make these changes. So, board, I open this up right now for discussion and dialogue. You know, as Mr. Hart and Mr. Matthews has stated, you've got a lot of verbiage in front of you, and certainly, you know, certainly willing and wanting to give everyone an opportunity to review and go through that process. So, board, thoughts and comments?
Well, I would like to say something. Thank you to y'all's committee for lots and lots of work and meetings that you all have done. The task force has done a really good job. I was able to preview this earlier in December, and I think that y'all did a really good job, and I support the efforts of your whole task force.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, concerns, amens, nays?
So help me understand how it's going to work.
That's a great question.
Well, I mean, the procedure here is to, this is the first eyes that legal will be able to look at this, and so this would have to be evaluated by legal and then come back through to the board, if this is the direction the board would like to give legal the direction to take. And then feasibility and logistics will be looked at from their perspective, and then that would come back to us for a future meeting to consider making the recommendation to the commission for adoption. So that's the next step. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So let's assume we approve it. It goes to public comment, so it gets published on the internet, so everybody can look at it. All the educators across the state can look at it, punch holes in it, add to it, subtract from it, and then if it's approved, then this becomes part of the Practice Act. So
part of our rules.
I mean, part of our rules. So that way, now we have a framework whereby these educators have to look at these and go, oh man, I'm missing some things here. I need to improve what I'm doing.
Yes.
And can I jump in here?
Yes.
This is Molly Feudel, Assistant General Counsel. So today what you would be doing is discussing these and kind of giving us a direction on where you'd like to go. We'd look further on it, and we'd also look at the fiscal impact to the licensees and the state and any other interested persons. And then we would bring it back to you at a subsequent meeting, and at that point, you would make a recommendation to post it in the Texas Register.
Right. It would not post between now and our next meeting. It would be, the posting would be after the next meeting.
And Brian Francis, Mr. Chairman and board members, you know, as we do a TDLR, I think it's valuable to have a lot of conversation and make sure folks know that we're that we're moving diligently and intelligently on this process. The things that you'll consider, you know, when it gets to a point of being put in place, you know, you always got to put in the logistics, the grandfathering per se, so it wouldn't impact any student who is currently enrolled. it would apply to students enrolled on or after a certain date, so you'd roll that out. We'd have plenty of rollout time to where the different programs and universities that are offering it would be able to come in and get a sense of it. For example, on one of our programs this week for the Electrician Advisory Board, during their advisory board meeting, we have their standard advisory board meeting going place, and then in the middle of it, we're holding a summit because we have all the folks there from the electrical industry talking about how can they improve or increase the number of qualified electricians. We may, at your next meeting, say, let's go on and build in a conversation moment where we invite the public, not even waiting until it gets published, but come on out and talk to us and have a summit and dialogue so that people can have a sense of ownership and input into the process and moving forward. So we will make sure, and we'll use Ray and of course, Stuart and those folks to make sure that we give all of those touch points so that when we have a product down the road, 6 months, 9 months, or whenever we're going to make it effective, that we've done all the vetting. You know, we've taken care of making sure that everyone who needs to have a say has been at the table. I think it's a great, great starting point.
Mr. Francis, I will say it's already started. We actually were involved in a meeting yesterday with some colleges and universities to where we pointed out and highlighted the problems.
Outstanding.
And we showed them that and even said, you know what, and showed them, hey, this is what looks like to come. And one of the things to support this is all things that already should be doing. Okay?
Exactly.
These are all things
not
that
gonna be a
should
dramatic
already
shift.
be
Yeah.
in these courses. And all we're doing is clarifying. So I see this document as a clarification document as to what they're doing. And so as we told them yesterday, you go back and you already start looking at your programs. Yes, there could be tweaks down the line. There could be an A and D in a different place or a different item. But for the most part, this is what is supposed to already be happening.
Absolutely.
And so it was very, very receptive, very, very, warmly greeted. We didn't hold any punches. We basically said the status quo is not acceptable. We have to do a better job to support this route, or this board and future boards has a harder time standing behind this route to licensure.
Right. One of the things, Brian Francis, one of the things that I learned early on in the process, and Spanky was involved in, the education of Brian, and I guess he's been involved in all of our educations now that I think about it. He's been around just a couple of days. But one of the things that I learned early on is that Texas is the leader in the area of athletic training, and this is just another example of us continuing that process of recognizing that we can't do things the same way. And so I think it's wonderful to have this full-blown discussion about where we can go and improve the educational process, and we'll make sure that we do it right on this end here, that people don't think that it's happening to them, but they are helping develop and drive this process.
Okay.
Chairman Weir.
Yes, sir.
Just a comment about our meeting yesterday that we held at Georgetown Eastview High School. We had 24 four-year institutions represented that came in out of some 50, I think, that were invited, and probably there were 5 phone calls from interested parties that were not able to attend due to work duties yesterday. So, and just to add to your comment that it was a very positive meeting, and I can really say that there were no objections by those that attended yesterday. They were appreciative of this new approach that we're taking to to the education of athletic training students, because they can go back to their college and university and actually show what the curriculum content is and what it looks like, and why that there needs to be, if there's going to be participation in the apprenticeship program, they need to commit to doing these things that are needed to make our students successful on the licensure exam.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Chairman Weir, I'd also like to add a little bit to what Dennis was saying, a lot in particular what Dr. Schmidt asked. This document should allow each college and university a lot of flexibility to be able to accomplish and present all of these points to the student within the education process. Some colleges and universities have 5 or 6 or 7 academic classes where a lot of these are going to be plugged into that process, while others may not be able to do that, but still in some other format, either through one-on-one in the athletic training room or through various other means, perhaps taking classes out of other disciplines such as nursing department or whatever, but be allowed a lot of flexibility to where one size doesn't necessarily fit all, because as we know, all colleges and universities within the state of Texas, you have the A&M system, you have the UT system, you have the tech system, and they all operate under their own different rules. So the task force feels like this would give colleges and universities a great deal of flexibility, but it's black and white. These are the things that must be presented to the athletic training student for him to become a successful licensed athletic trainer.
He or she, yes.
Yeah.
Other questions, board members? Comments? Red, I'm calling you. You're sitting there quiet. The wheel's spinning, it's just a little slow.
I don't disagree with the need for changes to be made. I mean, we're sitting here looking at a document that was created 40 years ago that, time has evolved and changes need to be made. And it's obvious by our statistics that there needs to be a standard that can be not adjudicated, but universities and programs held to. And those were discussions that we've had in meetings past. Talking through, I was excited about the opportunity to come to TDLR because of the mechanics, the working system that would allow us to, for lack of better terminology, better regulate what is being produced in our internship programs and allow us to produce the best athletic trainer that we can produce. I mean, we do want to be the leader in the industry as a state. At least I want us to be a leader in the production of future athletic trainers. And I like what I'm seeing. I have concerns over the difficulty of the staff here being able to determine that these are being met when it comes down to the applicant applying and having to demonstrate, you're right, each individual university has their own way of doing things and they have their own course descriptions. And I can see in the future that there will be some challenges with proving that some of these things are met, but those are bugs that have to be worked out. But I think change has to come, and it doesn't have to be difficult, and it appears that it's not going to be that way. And so this process carries through.
Okay. We as a board challenge to the public, and that's our number one crux of what that we're challenged and things to do. And so as far as some of those restrictions, Molly, I'll let you just speak in on behalf. You and I have had some of these discussions, but all the board has not. So as far as the statutory authority and things like that in regards to us doing it, that really the universities have to take that ownership and standpoint.
Right. So universities and colleges are self-regulated. They're regionally accredited, some are nationally accredited, and they essentially regulate themselves. We at TDLR do not have any statutory authority to directly regulate colleges and universities. But what you do have authority over is requirements for entry into the profession. So the apprenticeship, education, things like that, and you can change those as you see fit as necessary to protect the health and safety of the public. And so when you see an issue coming up through the profession like you do right now, you can't go directly to the universities and say, you need to do this, 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 and this. It needs to be, if you want to come into the profession, we need you to demonstrate competency by doing this, this, and this, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Mr. Fitch?
Well, kind of as an outsider looking in from the industry, obviously I was concerned when I saw these statistics. I believe consistency is always important, and I think putting together a consistent program that all universities will ultimately follow will certainly provide better athletic trainers, and that's what it's all about.
Thoughts, other considerations?
What's our benchmark? What ultimately, 5 years from now, is it going to be an improved graduation rate across the board for the apprenticeship programs? Is that?
Are you talking about success rate in the exam
Yeah.
scores? That's what I would hope.
Yes, I mean, I think that's and that's where we're going to have to employ some patience. Obviously, there's going to be some institutions, I feel like, that may kind of jumpstart and try to take even some of their current students and say, you know what, we need to try to get you caught up as much as we can, you know. But truly, there's going to be some institutions that have got to implement. And they're not going to implement until, you know, number one, they see it in the rules. Number two is that then they can start with their first, their incoming freshman class and put the new classes in. So then, you know, boards may not be able to see these success rates or actually, you know, 4 years, 5 years
Right.
in cases of some students
Right.
that are taking that long. So we will employ patience. You know, we won't be able to probably come back and see, you know, in 1 year and say, okay, we're headed in that right direction. So, yeah, a lot of thought has to be employed to make these changes. But within our framework as to what we can do, and the challenges that we have and the authorities that we are given, you know, unless the board can come up with a better plan or some function of this plan, I don't know what else to do.
It looks great. I mean,
Chairman Ware.
Yes, sir.
Just to clarify on the domains and the knowledge and skills area, there are many ways to do that, and we are not dictating to the college and university that they have to add courses that contain those domains. There are many different ways to approach this according to what the college and university will support. I personally know of institutions that do not offer some of these domains in formal college coursework, but their athletic training educators have special meetings, guest speakers, and curriculum events that are outside of the normal credit hour type of courses. So what our whole concept was to provide what the exam development committee, what, you know, their test questions are going to be taken from the domains. That's where they come from now. But our college educators and our athletic training students really, unless they investigate those, they don't see them in writing. And so we feel like that not only is this going to be helpful for our educators, but helpful for our college administration when they realize the scope of the preparation that athletic trainers are needed to be exposed to be good practitioners. And what Chairman Weir and our task force discussed the application process, and that, you know, within the application, our educator that signs an application, those athletic training student or that particular candidate has been exposed to the curriculum content that will make them the type of practitioner that we want to take care of the people that we serve. We think that's a positive, and we see the application process being another way that college educator is going to have to put their name on the application that they were exposed to the curriculum content, and they believe that they can be successful on the exam, and that's our goal.
Yes, and I think, within our rules, we have an hours requirement for the apprenticeship of 1,800 hours. But what we want to make sure and ensure is that 1,800 hours is quality and not quantity as far as in that educational effort. We're not looking for 1,800 hours of labor of doing mundane tasks in the athletic training room or on a field. That 1,800 hours is spent in a learning environment to allow these individuals to be more successful. And I don't think adding the hours is not going to accomplish it. We've got to increase the quality of the product given. And that ownership now of these athletic trainers that are signing off, and one of the terminology they use is a coordinator, and having a defined person that's going to take ownership for those students to know that this content has been presented, much of it has been tested before they send an application to Austin to be examined. And with that, we'll take ownership that no longer am I not just signing a timesheet, which is what they've been doing, is that now they're taking responsibility and ownership for their students and their students' successes in their programs. So I think we're kind of the point of board. May I take a board vote to say that we will move this on to, as is, we will move this on to Molly and her group for evaluation and to look at the logistics and those things. May I call for a motion for that, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Director?
You can, Mr. Chairman, but let me tweak your verbiage just a little bit. Molly's role is to really evaluate the legal sufficiency of it. She doesn't really have a team. She's part of a team.
Okay.
And so really putting it to the department
I apologize. Okay,
and
yes.
how we do things.
Sure.
Because, here at TDLR, it is,
No, I didn't mean, okay.
No, and I know you didn't, but we have amazing legal staff. But I think the rest of the world, when they hear it's going to go to an attorney, freaks out. So I want the listening audience to know that our staff is talented. They're talented. However, the process at TDLR is, I was asking Stuart just a second ago, I want to look at what that exam pass rate is on the BOC and see what that examination is. When you look at this data here, there are some universities that have some best practices already that we can talk to. And so, our group's going to be doing the diligence has come here, but now we're going to add the do to it and really do some more research and bring you back even more data about here's what we found X, here's what we found Y. And so just making a recommendation for the staff to start working and bringing something back to the advisory board is
Sure.
more
Well,
than
Mr. Francis, you think that, and I'll correct me for.
No, that's all right. I just
singling
want
out a
Molly
person,
thinks she's been
because
working 20-hour days.
If Molly said, I'm not going to tackle this and turns her resignation in tomorrow, then we would have to come back and change our motion, right? So, but I will say, you brought up the pass rate. When I was with the DSHS board and we looked at the exam waiver, we looked at athletic trainers that were coming out of accredited programs and coming in and taking our test, because at that point in time, it was a requirement. Everyone had to take the exam.
Right.
And it was at a 96% pass rate, which was well worth it.
Wow.
Doing a great job.
Absolutely.
And so that was the framework, that was the support that board needed to put in exam waiver. We felt like it was a redundant exercise, and it was just cost prohibitive and time prohibitive to apply that to those individuals. We received much public comment in regards to that, many for, many against, but the board stood behind that statistics. So that's just a little bit of a history from you of what that
Absolutely.
board looked at in regards to exam waiver. And, you know, one of the things in the CATIE accredited programs, those CATIE program directors and things like that, to go through their accreditation process, their students have to be successful on these exams. I mean, they're being evaluated by CATIE, they're being evaluated by their departments and things like that. That's how they're kept on in regards to, and then many of these apprenticeship programs, which are being driven more out of athletics, those same types of evaluation processes and things that close the gaps are not always in place. And so therefore, that's some of the problems and some of the issues that we've incurred.
Absolutely. Brian Francis, one of the things that I think we're going to discover, not only is this, as we try to move with a flexible but consistent framework that all the schools or the apprenticeship programs will govern under, we're going to find out, in the most delicate way of saying it, is that not every athletic trainer is capable of training. And building that consistency and train the trainer side of it, we're going to figure out that that's where some of the focus, and I know that some of this touches on that, but that is going to be a focal point too. I do poetry in another world. Not every great poet can teach another person how to write. They're fantastic poets in the way they write, and they have their own style. And we've got that same normal distribution.
Right.
And so figuring out ways to improve the delivery mechanism of each individual athletic trainer, that's part of the cultural shift that we're going to have here as well.
Right.
I'm excited for it to be.
Well, and that was stated yesterday, Mr. Francis, that, this may not work for every institution, but, there are ways that you could still employ students, give them some experiences that prepare them then to move on into master's programs, entry-level master's programs, and things like that. But those students, don't send them to Austin to be tested. You know that you haven't done your due diligence in their education, so take ownership in that. Be upfront with them. Don't just take their money and tell them you're going to educate them if you can't do it. Just be honest, and then direct them that if you're wanting an undergraduate athletic training education experience, I'm not probably the best place for you. But if you just want some experiences, I can provide that. But you're going to need to take a path on into the master's program and go that route. So we made that statement yesterday.
Thanks, great.
Any other thoughts? Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion from the board to go ahead and pursue this into the next level staff evaluation to look at future adoption. So Dr. Smith made the motion, and Red has seconded. Any other discussion before I call for a vote? All in favor, would you indicate by saying aye?
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Okay, so staff, giving you some marching orders.
We got it.
We appreciate that.
We got it. Our boots are ready and strapped. We're ready.
Excellent. Okay, so
I just want to say, sorry, I had 2 coughing attacks during all of that, but
As long as
I
you
just
don't
wanted to
cough on
apologize.
me,
I'm not, I'm fighting allergies, so I just want everybody to know that's the reason why, so I wouldn't sit here.
no worries. Well, we
Sorry.
trusted, we maintained at least a 4, so we knew from a standpoint of discussion,
All right.
we were going to be legal.
Sorry
and
about that.
Felt like we were not going to take a vote until you could get back in.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, Brian Francis,
Yes, sir.
Board Member Webb, I was a little worried about it, and I was thinking, man, maybe we shouldn't ever sit so close to the chair. And that's why but now I realized it was
It's
allergies.
allergies, it's allergies, and thanks for the hot
Can't move
tea.
her to the end because you haven't moved me to the end, okay?
Okay,
The door is open.
Board, you were sent basically some house cleaning rules and things as we continue to evolve over, and as other legislation comes out of the legislature, we periodically have some cleanup, and so I call Molly to the stand to basically go over these particular rules and to go from there. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to go through these proposed rule changes. Please stop me if you have any questions. These are coming from bill implementation, House Bill 4007, which itself was a cleanup bill, a statutory cleanup. And we've added in some other things that we just think make the rules easier to understand for staff and for licensees. So there's nothing super exciting here, but we do need to get through it. So the first one is 110.1, authority. So what we did here was we moved the definitions out and put in the authority for you guys to make these rules. This is consistent with TDLR drafting style. We do the same items across programs in each section for ease of staff as well as people who are duly licensed. So this is not a substantive change. That's what 110.1 is. Moving on to 110.10, the definitions. We moved the existing definitions here. We did one change, and that was under 2, the new 2, which was the old 3. It used to say board, now it says advisory board. 110.14, all we did was we took out the instead of the advisory board membership. It's just advisory board membership. For 110.19 reimbursement, we're recommending that we remove this provision. The reason why is because we do not have statutory authority to reimburse you. We also, as my understanding, we don't have the appropriations. If we do get that authority and we do get those funds, we can start reimbursing you without this rule being there. So this rule is doing nothing right now other than being contrary to a statute and taking up space. So that's why we're recommending that it be removed. 110.20 application requirements. We're getting rid of D, which refers to fitness requirements in this chapter. That's because there are no more fitness requirements in those chapter. Those are all in Chapter 51 of the Occupations Code, which is TDLR's enabling statute. And then we've renumbered the rest of the subsections. 110.21 under A1G, we changed it from therapeutic exercise or rehabilitation or therapeutic modalities so that it says therapeutic in front of each one. We believe this is what was intended, and it's not really a substantive change, it's just to make it easier to understand. Under subsection D, we changed applicants to an applicant. Just makes it easier to understand. In E2, we changed the department. It says current certification for emergency medical services, EMS, with the department. We changed that to the Department of State Health Services or its successor agency, because when department was in there, that now refers to TDLR. 110.23, examination for licensure. We made some changes under B1 and 2. This is just aligning under current practice that there is a practical, a written, and a jurisprudence examination. Breaking this all out in the rules makes it easier for applicants to understand, and it just makes the rule better reflective of how things work. And then the rest of the changes in 110.23, again, are designed to make it easier to understand. C was essentially broken up into multiple subsections, and then we changed some verbiage to say the applicant, just to make it easier to understand. I want to point to subsection D. We took out some verbiage about the applicant paying the required examination fee. The reason why we did that is because that examination fee is paid to our third party who administers the exam. It's not paid to TDLR. Under E, we removed the language at least 30 days prior to the next scheduled examination. That's because, again, there's this disconnect between what we do and what the third party does. The third party, you understand, okay. And we added in the registration deadline in E just to make it easier to understand. Subsection F, we are recommending be removed. It talks about the examination registration form being completed and returned to the department. Again, that's something that's done by the third party now. In new G, which was the old H, instead of saying the department shall notify each applicant of the results, we put department's designee. In H2, we said the department will make available a copy of the department's policy concerning examination review to an applicant who fails an examination. It used to say furnish, or it currently says furnish. We want to change it to make available. The reason why is because we put this on our website, and furnish sounds like we're mailing a copy. Make available is just more reflective of our current practice. And then the rest of the proposed changes in this section are just renumbering. So we'll move on to 110.25, continuing education requirements. In A, it says to renew a license that expires on or after September 1st, 2015. We're taking out that language about September 1st, 2015, because it's obsolete at this point. And then we also removed, we changed have completed to complete, just for consistent tense. And we're changing the previous 2-year period to each license term. We made a similar change in A2, and the reason why, it's substantively the same, but the 2-year period doesn't exactly let the reader know what that 2-year period is, whereas the license term is more reflective of that. And then the rest of the proposed changes are just renumbering. I'll move on to 110.30. In B, we inserted the word practical. So it says the temporary license entitles an applicant to perform the activities of an athletic trainer until the results of the first practical examination, which the applicant is eligible to take, are released. The reason why is because we are currently requiring applicants to take the written first and pass that, and then take the practical. When it just said examination, that could have been interpreted to mean written, and we want to clarify, no, that means practical.
That's even better, because now you'd start that clearing process earlier. Like that.
So, and then in D, it's more cleanup language. A person who was, instead of has been, licensed as an athletic trainer, but is no longer eligible to late renew the license, versus and allowed the license to expire. Expire, sometimes people think that means late renew, but we just clarified it. 110.80, fees. This might be the most interesting part. Under the new A1, essentially what we did was we collapsed the initial license fee with the initial application fee into one fee. So the fee amount for the initial license is not changing. It's $160. It's always been $160, but we're moving it into them paying one fee versus paying for the application and the license. And that's just consistent with what TDLR does for all of its license types. For B2, the temporary license fee of $160, that actually has been reduced from $200 to $160 to make it consistent with that initial fee, initial licensure fee. B3, the renewal license fee, that has also been reduced to $160. I believe it used to be $250. And again, that's to make it consistent with the initial license fee. Under B4, we added...
Mr. Chairman, Brian Francis, Molly, you're doing fantastic. Typically, when we announce that lowering of the fees, we have a confetti drop, but we were unable to get that set up.
Well, I was fixing to say, I thought we'd get a drum roll
We
here.
were unable to get that set up, but I still think it's contingent upon the advisory board recommending that the rules be published. So you guys may be the bad guys and say increase the fee back up. So
No,
I
that
just
would
wanted
be
to
a
let you know.
shooting party outside for us that would be gathered, so.
Okay, so B4, the duplicate replacement fee for licenses issued under this chapter, $25. That's new. You haven't had it in the past, but all TDLR programs have it, so we're adding it to be consistent. We are removing the existing B3 and 4, which are the written examination fee and practical examination fee. It's not free, but those examination fees are being paid to the third party, so that's why we're taking them out of our rules. We're also taking out B5, the initial license fee, again, because that has been combined with the application fee. B6, the return check fee of $25, we're removing that because it conflicts with a TDLR procedural rule, which actually prescribes a $50 fee for a dishonored payment device. You refer to that later in your rules, so it's actually, there's a conflict right now in the rules that we're trying to resolve. B7, that the renewal license of $250, we're removing that and just putting it higher up. B8, the jurisprudence exam fee, again, we're removing that because it goes to the third party. And then C, we're saying specifically, the fees for the written examination, practical examination, and the jurisprudence examination are set by and payable to the department's designee. That's how it is already. We're just making the rules reflective of current practice. And then we're renumbering sections, and in E, we're adding a "the" in front of dishonored return check or payment fee, just to make it easier to read. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to section 110.90, administrative penalties and sanctions. This is just general cleanup. We're removing the reference to chapter 451 in there. Because the authority to issue administrative penalties and sanctions comes from Chapter 51 now instead of 451. In Section 110.95, Enforcement Authority, we are taking out the reference to Chapter 51 because what the statute that is actually being enforced is Chapter 451, not 51. So it's just general cleanup to make everything reflective of what we're currently doing and easier to understand.
Board, any questions, comments, concerns?
On the, just to educate the ignorant here, 110.80, section B2, the temporary license fee is at $160. What happens when they complete their process to receive their initial? Is there an additional charge, or is that $160 going to cover the new license when that occurs?
I believe they do have to apply for the initial licensure because it's a different license than the temporary license.
So they're paying $160 for the temp.
For 6 months.
They'll come back and another $160 for the,
Yes.
To make it permanent.
Brian Francis, Mr. Gaines, in some of our programs, you will see a fee and the authority to charge a fee that basically says step up to the full license. So it's an intermediate or less fee. So it's $160, and then to get the new one, they pay $25 or $50. That authority doesn't reside here, but that's something that, if we go through the strategic planning process, if that's something you guys think that should be appropriate or available here, we can have that conversation. But it would require a statutory tweak. Or if you just want them to keep paying $160 plus another $160, it just stays the way it is. See how I boxed you in that corner there?
yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate you putting me there. Paybacks are a beast. Don't forget.
I know.
I just wanted to make sure that I understood that, that what we were doing was, it basically requires a double payment to come in and start early and then get your permanent license or your official professional license, and, okay.
Keep in mind, this is Brian Francis, that in the past, the temporary license scenario was because of the break in the examination when it was offered.
Right.
And so you don't have as much as that now, and we really don't have a great usage or reliance on the temporary license.
Other questions or comments? Then not hearing any motion, but to accept and move forward. Yes?
Motion.
Y'all, okay, Mr. Fitch, so I'll take the motion from Mr. Fitch. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Red, Mr. Gaines has the second on that. Any other comments or discussions before I call for the vote? None heard. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Okay, proceed forward.
Thank you. So we'll get those published in the Texas Register, and at the next meeting, we'll bring you back any public comments that we receive.
Okay, thank you very much. Board, I've tried to push it down the line, but I can't not to do our board training. But I will ask that if anybody need a restroom or a temporary recess before we go into our formalized required Open Meetings Act training, Administrative Practice Act training, and Public Information Act training. So does anybody need a brief recess in regards to that?
I'd appreciate it.
Okay, so we'll stand in recess for 5 minutes. We'll come back to order at 10:45. Is that adequate? Okay, 10:45, and we will move forward then with that training. Session at 10:50. So Molly, you are on board for training.
All right. Oh, sorry, I'll get the microphone. So since we're near the end of the meeting, I'll ask you to hold any questions, and that way I can come and talk to you individually after the meeting's over and everybody doesn't have to sit here and listen. So today we're going to be talking about open government. We're going to cover 3 statutes: the Open Meetings Act, the Administrative Procedure Act, and the Public Information Act. So the overarching theme for all of this is open government. Government is for the people, by the people. We're here to serve the people, and we can't do that unless the people know what we're doing and why. So we'll start with the Open Meetings Act. The purpose is to ensure open and transparent government. It requires meetings of governmental bodies, like you, to be open to the public, to be preceded by public notice, that's the agenda, and the subject matter of the meeting. The Open Meetings Act is mandatory. It's not just if you want to. And all the provisions are to be liberally construed in favor of open government. So some of the key concepts: a quorum. A quorum is majority of the members of the advisory board. So you have 5 members, a quorum would be three of you. A quorum of the governmental body, including an advisory board, must be present in order to make a decision. If, let's say, something happens and only 2 of you are able to make it, you can still discuss whatever you want to talk about, but you can't take any official action, so you can't take any kind of votes. Another key concept: deliberation. A deliberation is a verbal exchange during a meeting between a quorum or between a quorum and a third person. So, for example, somebody sitting here for public comment concerning an issue within the jurisdiction of the advisory board, so board business. If you're talking about what you did last weekend, that's not board business, doesn't have to be on the agenda, doesn't have to be in an open meeting. The next key concept is meetings. So a meeting occurs anytime a quorum of you meet and discuss board business. And that brings us to the next concept: notice. That's the agenda. So we have to provide written notice of the date, time, place, and subject of each meeting. That's in the agenda, which is filed with the Texas Secretary of State. It's published on our website as well as the Secretary of State's website, and you can't engage in any discussions on anything that is not listed on the agenda. And so just to give you the reasoning behind this, this is to give the public notice of what you're going to be talking about so they can decide whether or not they want to attend. So a common question: what about social functions, conventions, workshops, that kind of thing? So keeping in mind that a meeting occurs when and wherever a quorum engages in a discussion about public business, can members ever meet in an informal setting without violating the Open Meetings Act? The answer is, of course, yes. If you want to have just a social event, a party, happy hour, whatsoever, and you're just talking about things that are not board business, that's fine. You don't have to publish an agenda for that. If you are attending a professional convention, you can go ahead and do that. While you're there, you can talk about issues that are incidental to that event, so things that are coming up in the profession, but you can't talk about board business. So you can't talk about, well, I think we should change the rule to do this, this, and this. A quorum of you can't talk about that. So some of the key points to remember: always be aware of any situation in which a quorum of you are present, 3 or more. You just want to be aware and make sure you don't talk about board business accidentally. Don't engage in substantive conversations relating to board business when a quorum is present and you're outside of an official meeting where we've published the agenda. And the third one: beware the walking quorum. Which brings us to the next slide. What is a walking quorum? A walking quorum occurs when fewer than a quorum talk about board business, but then communicate that to a third person. So it's helpful to think about this as a chain. 2 people, 2 board members talking about board business, and then one of those 2, or both, going and contacting a third person about the board business that you were talking about. Even though those communications are not contemporaneous, they are still a quorum, and you would still need to comply with all of the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. So here's a good example. On a 5-member advisory board, 2 members exchange phone calls and emails expressing thoughts on an upcoming rule change and exchange research that they have each individually performed regarding that issue. One of those board members subsequently forwards the exchange to another board member. These members have now engaged in a walking quorum by engaging in a small group discussion outside of a properly noticed board meeting. So they have violated the Open Meetings Act. So walking quorums can occur during phone calls, conference calls, or like we talked about, just 2-person phone calls where it's then one of those people on the phone call talks to a third board member. It can occur during video conferences, hallway discussions, emails, text messages, anything, anywhere. Some best practices to avoid the walking quorum. Don't meet in small groups to discuss board business. Don't send emails or texts to a quorum of members regarding board business. Not all at the same time, not individually, just don't. If somebody emails you or calls you on a topic, don't then forward that email to a third board member. Don't create posts on social media about board business. So, for an example, let's say that one of you posts on Facebook, just went to the advisory board meeting, had a great time, really excited about some of these upcoming rule changes to section 110.21. And then 2 other board members view that post. That's then a walking quorum, because 3 people have then seen those communications about board business, and it's been outside of an officially noticed meeting. Don't ask a quorum of members, even on an individual basis, for feedback or comments about board business outside of the meeting. That's called polling, which is essentially taking an informal vote before the meeting. Some guidelines for open sessions. We can only discuss what's listed on the agenda. During public comment period, you're allowed to make limitations on the commenters, for example, the amount of time that they have to speak. And a member of the public or a member of the board may raise a subject that's not on the agenda, but the discussion is going to have to be limited to placing it on the agenda, on a future agenda. So some best practices. Limit your discussions to the specific agenda items that have been published. Avoid allowing discussions about agenda topics to wander. That happens so easily, and luckily I'll be sitting there and trying to make sure that doesn't happen. Don't respond to or discuss issues that are raised during public comment but are not on the agenda. So today we specifically designed the agenda so that the public comment, the things that we thought were going to come up in public comment would be on the agenda. But sometimes somebody comes in public comment and says something that's completely out of the blue. It's tempting to want to respond, but if it's not on the agenda, we can't. All we can do is say, let's talk about that next meeting. And specifically identify any items that you'd like to be on the agenda so that we can be sure to talk about them during the next meeting. So what happens if we violate the Open Meetings Act? Well, any action that's taken in violation of the Open Meetings Act can be voidable. So if you take a vote and that on a topic that was not on the agenda, somebody can go to court and challenge that, and we'd have to undo that. There are also criminal penalties for members who knowingly conspire to circumvent the Open Meetings Act, and the penalties are a fine or going to jail or both. So some best practices: avoid communications that involve a quorum of board members about board business unless you're in a meeting here in this room and we've posted the agenda. And during open meetings, talk only about the things that are posted on the agenda. So some resources: the Attorney General's website has a handbook as well as a video that talks more about the Open Meetings Act. If you're curious about the statute itself, you can go to the Government Code, Chapter 551, and feel free to call me or anybody in the General Counsel's office if you ever have any questions. And I'll email you after this meeting to give you my contact information. So next we're going to move on to the Administrative Procedure Act, which essentially talks about rulemaking. And one of the purposes is to provide for public participation and transparency during the rulemaking process. Again, open government, making sure that the people who are going to be subject to the rules have a voice in creating them. So the definition of a rule, you probably are very familiar with what a rule is. Generally, we tend to think of these as code of conduct or application requirements, things like that. And when we're talking about rules here, we're not just talking about creating new rules, we're also talking about amending existing rules or repealing existing rules. So some of the sources for rulemaking: how do rules come about? Sometimes a bill has been passed and we need to implement that bill, and so that's why we'll engage in rulemaking. Or maybe you'll create a work group to talk about something that you see upcoming and some rules that you would like to pass. Or a discussion here in the meeting like we had today. TDLR staff, sometimes when we're going about our jobs, we see an issue that keeps popping up and we think maybe a rule might need to be created or amended to address this. There's also the 4-year rule review and a rule petition. So any interested person can submit a petition to a state agency requesting the adoption of a rule. An interested person is basically any person or entity located in Texas. Can be a can be a person, a business entity, a governmental subdivision, or a public or private organization. So here's a flow chart on the rulemaking process. You don't have to memorize this, so don't worry. Basically, the idea comes up for the rule. Staff will meet and we'll discuss the idea and we'll draft something. We'll then bring it to you for your consideration and ask for any comments that you have. We will then file those rules with the Texas Register. They will be on the Texas Register and the public will have 30 days to submit their comments to us. We'll then look at those comments and we'll also bring them to you in a public meeting just like this. And you can make any changes or do what you'd like in response to the public comments. Then you make a recommendation to the TDLR Commission. The Commission will review the rules and decide whether or not they want to go forward with them. If they do, they will file the adoption with the Texas Register and the rules become effective 20 days after that. There's also a flow chart here for the rule review process, the 4-year rule review process. Essentially, we file a notice of intent to review in the Texas Register and people send us their comments, and then we will make changes based on those comments. And it occurs in a 2-step process, even though there are 6 steps here. Some more rulemaking resources. Again, the Attorney General's office, their website has a handbook on it. The Government Code, Chapter 2001, is the statute itself. The Secretary of State's website actually has the Texas Register on it and the Texas Administrative Code, which is where all the rules are located. And of course, General Counsel's office, feel free to contact us at any point if you have any questions. So we're going to move on to the Public Information Act, which is also known as Open Records. So the Public Information Act is intended to allow each person information about the affairs of government and the official acts of public officials and employees. It makes all documents, records, any sort of information relating to official business open to the public with some exceptions, and most of those exceptions don't apply. Public information includes any electronic communication created, transmitted, received, or maintained on any device if it is in connection with official business. So this means if you are using your personal cell phone, your personal computer or tablet to store documents about board business or text messages, emails, etc. about board business, if we receive an open records request, we are going to ask you to search those devices because anything, any sort of text or anything like that is subject to open records laws. And the Act itself says that it should be construed liberally in favor of granting requests for that information. So once we get a request for public information, we have 10 days to respond to that request. So if you receive a request that looks anything like a public information request, it doesn't specifically have to say this is a public information request. It can just say, I want to see X. Please forward it to us as soon as possible. But on the same token, if we get a request for public information, we're going to send that to you as soon as possible, and we ask you to respond quickly. By the way, if we received a request for public information, we can't ask why somebody wants the information, but we can just ask them to clarify if we're unsure about what they're asking. Some of the exceptions to disclosure, we can redact certain information like date of birth, social security number, personal email, education documents, and HIPAA information. But again, most information and most records are subject to disclosure, so just keep that in mind. Some resources, the Attorney General's Office has a handbook as well as a video. If you want to look at the Public Information Act itself, it's in Chapter 552 of the Government Code. Again, you're invited to contact me or anybody at the General Counsel's office if you ever have any questions. And we even have an open records email address, which is open.records@tdlr.texas.gov. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Molly, for that presentation and the timeliness of it. Moving on to Board, do you have any specific agenda items? And if you want to state any of those today that we need to make sure for the record that are going on the next agenda? Anything specifically? I know we added some things for today from our last meeting that we addressed today. If also possible, in enough time, Christine, if you could just give Board, when you give notice of, to ask for them to add any agenda items that, ever. So if you ever get into a situation, just make sure we can get those published on time for our agenda. So, Board, you're welcome to send an email to her at any point in time to add an agenda item. So reinforce that. But hearing none specifically today, then we can, we'll move on to item K. Right now, we are scheduled for our next board meeting for April the 23rd at 9 a.m. Is that still okay with everybody on board?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we want to go ahead and then set our next one past that for probably sometime in the summer? Could anticipate needing to take action on some of the things that we did today, possibly in the summertime. So I know that last summer we met right before SWATA, but SWATA I think is going back to Arlington this year. Yes. Is there a good time in June or July that you guys would like to look at? Let's stay with the Monday themes if we could. I think it typically works pretty good for Dr. Smith's surgery schedules.
I think July would work better for me.
Okay. So would we want to do that week of SWATA, let's say the 23rd? Is that the week of SWATA, or is it no, I'm sorry, the 16th.
The 16th, SWATA's.
SWATA is the 16th. Would that Monday, July 16th, is acceptable for you, Mr. Gaines?
Yeah, I'm good
Dr.
with that.
Schmidt?
Okay.
Mr. Fitch?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go ahead and, you know, we can change this if something falls apart, but let's go ahead and tentatively schedule July 16th. Does that work for you and staff? Okay. So we'll tentatively set July 16th, that Monday, 9 a.m. as our meeting following our April meeting. And that should allow us enough time to do the things that need to be done. Anything else for the good of the order? I know we spent a little bit more time today, but obviously when you spend time traveling, I want to make sure it's worthwhile. I think we got a lot accomplished today. I thank you, board, for your participation and the work you've done. Obviously, it was a great meeting and opportunity to recognize this family today and Kayla's contribution. So if nothing else is said, I will adjourn the meeting.